Okay, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. I'm excited to learn together. I think it will be a fun, exciting, and also important, hopefully inspirational topic, and that is the topic of saving our speech, exploring the laws of Lashon Hara, and how they might apply today. Generally, there are two books that I have consulted in preparing some of this. One is the very well-known book that I think we'll encounter pretty frequently today, and that is the book of the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim, of course, was one of the great Gedolim of the 20th century, of Yisrael Meir Kagan. There it is. And he wrote He wrote the landmark book on the topic. Thank you so much. Everybody take some refreshments. I really appreciate this. He wrote the landmark book. It's actually called the Chafetz Chaim, right? The Chafetz Chaim is known as the Chafetz Chaim, not because of the book that he wrote, the Mishnah Brura. He doesn't call himself the Mishnah Brura, which is probably more well known. But Yisrael Meir Kagan was very passionate about this topic. And of course, the name Chafetz Chaim comes from the pasuk that which you recite. I'll take it later. It's okay. On Shabbos, Mia Isha Chafetz Chaim Oiv Yom L'Rosov, who is the man that desires life, loves days to see the good, Nitzor L'Shon Chamera, he who guards his mouth from speaking evil. That's a very classical and these days work on the topic. There's a more contemporary work on the topic written by Rabbi Daniel Feldman on the topic, which I also have consulted, which maybe we'll get to later. So let's start from the beginning. That's what I want to do this evening. And I really would like to make this more interactive rather than source-based, although we do have a few sources. I'll share my screen now for those who are on Zoom. Thank you so much for joining. Here's my screen. I'll make it even bigger. Let's make it full screen. Why not? So those who are there can see. Perfect. Here we go. We'll get rid of this navigation situation. And let's start from the very beginning. Lashon hara, of course, means language, actually. But in this context, it means speech. Hara means evil. Ra is evil. So Lashon hara is evil speech. There's a prohibition against evil speech. We'll see the Rambam quotes it. It's based on a biblical prohibition, a verse in the Torah. My question is, what is so evil about evil speech? What's so evil about evil speech? Of course, the evil needs to be defined, but there is a very well-known axiom, very well-known piece of wisdom, which is, of course, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. All Lashon hara ultimately are words. But what could be so bad about words? What's so bad? Why do we so heavily discourage it? Now, you might say, do we so heavily discourage it? Are the rabbis particularly upset with someone who says Lashon hara? The answer is yes, emphatically. And just to prove that, I want to return to this and just at the end of our discussion, which I don't think will go too long, so don't worry. We'll start from source number one here. Take a look at this Gemara and source number one, those who have source sheet in front of them. I think you'll find it quite startling. Quite startling. This is Talmud Arachin, 15b. Now, I made it a lot shorter for you. There are a lot of psukim these rabbis are quoting, but what we have here is a selection of rabbis saying that someone who speaks Lashon hara is really, really, really bad. Let's start with number one. Amr Yochanan Mishum Yosef and Zimra call Mesaper Lashon hara ki'ilu kafar be'ikar. Anyone who speaks Lashon hara, it is as if he denied the ikar, the main idea, i.e., God's existence. Someone who speaks Lashon hara, it is as if he denies the very existence of God. That seems quite extreme, doesn't it? You might imagine someone who believes in God and says Lashon hara. Startling. Phrase two, statement two, another one by Rav Yossi ben Zimra. Okay, this we know. Anybody who speaks Lashon hara will be afflicted with negaim, affliction, sarad. It's this week's parsha. Moving on, the Gemara actually says the word mitzora, which is someone who has sarad, is motzi ra, someone who emits evil. Okay, next. Amar Rish Lakish, kolha misaper Lashon hara magdil avonot ad la shamayim. Anyone who speaks Lashon hara grows their sins up to the heavens. I know many of you might have a green hand, like to grow things, but what you don't want to be growing is your sins up to the heavens. Sounds pretty bad. Continuing. Amar of Chissa Amar Mar Ukva call Mesaper Lashon hara ra'oi lesoklo be'even. anyone who speaks Lashon Hara is worthy of getting stoned. Getting stoned. That sounds pretty harsh. And finally, Amar al Chista, Amar Mar Ukva, Kol HaMisaper Lashon Hara, anyone who speaks Lashon Hara, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, Ein ani vehu yecholin lador ba'olam. God says, we cannot dwell together in the world. I cannot share the world with such a person. So it sounds pretty bad that God has Hashem, and we discourage all sins. We have a unique distaste for Lashon Hara. And my question is, why? It's just speech, it's just words. Andrew, go for it. Andrew's been dying to say something.
You can just go back.
Okay, yes.
What?
Well, that's what we have to talk about. And I don't know if I'm gonna come up with a good definition for you, because I don't know if I can say every stage, but what is evil speech? What is evil speech? This is something that I want to deal with. Good. Fair. Correct. That's fair. We have to define what evil speech is. Well, we're gonna do it in a second, so don't you worry. Or the Rambam will give a sort of definition, a sketch out definition. Let's say it means, for now, that when you speak in a denigrating way of another person. Let's leave it at that. Very generally, which is basically what the Chofetz Chaim says. Misaper devar ginut al chavero. Devar ginut is something that is negative, that puts them in a worse light. A denigrating statement about another person is Lashon Hara. And it's very broad, whether it's true or it's not true, whether it's in front of them or not in front of them, whether it's to many people or to no one else except one person. It might be lying, it's not Lashon Hara. It might be another thing. There are many different prohibitions in the Torah relating to speech, but that's not one of them. Yeah.
Hearing about something.
Ah. Okay, so we're gonna get to all of this. Hopefully, the answer is probably no. The answer is probably no, and I want to know why. So Andrew asked a good question. Let me ask you a few questions. I'll ask you a few questions. So Andrew makes a good point. Let's say you have something very negative about somebody, very negative, but it's important to share that information, i.e., somebody wants to go into business with them, or somebody that you care about and you want to tell their parents or another family member to help take care of them. So I'm going to tell you the truth is that you're allowed to do that, and it's a mitzvah to do that. The question is why? Why isn't it still negative? It's negative speech by another person. If somebody hears them, I think badly. Just give me a moment if you don't mind. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot. We're just beginning. Okay, another case. What if it's something that is not objectively negative? I don't know. Say I'm gonna pick on Avram. He's Spartak. I'm just joking. Say about Avram. Oh, that's like, Avram ben Zaken eats rice on Pesach. Ooh, I don't even know if that's true. Not, or even if I said, I don't know, I don't think he's the best pitcher. Can't throw a fastball. Is that negative? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Nothing objectively bad about not being a good pitcher. What if I don't mean it in a negative light? Or if I don't think it's negative, but somebody else might? These are all interesting questions that relate to this. What if it is negative? But I'm just so angry at someone, I just need to get it off my chest. I can't bear it. I'm just so upset. I need to talk to someone about it. Now, again, whether or not those might be permitted, and they might be, maybe not the second last one, but even if those are permitted, we want to ask, why are they permitted? Why are they permitted? Are we saying that they're permitted because it's a problem, but the positive impact of you saying the information outweighs the negative impact it might have about that person, right? So say, for instance, someone is a student in class and I tell their teacher, so-and-so cheated on their test. So on the one hand, their teacher is now going to certainly look at them in a more negative light, and it might impact their grade. On the other hand, it's important. It's very important to share that information with the teacher. So is the reason that it's allowed because it's more important to share that information, and that outweighs whatever negative impact it will have on the student? Maybe it's different than that. That's what we have to get to. Fair? And then that will hopefully this will relate to why it's so bad. And that's what I really want to focus on. So once we know the source of this prohibition, hopefully we can answer some of these questions. So let's start with the Rambam in source number 2. There are 3, I mentioned a more contemporary book. I mentioned L'chorei Time. In the Rishonim that I know of, there are 2 Rishonim that treat this topic more extensively. The Rambam, because the Rambam treated every topic as extensively as he could. And Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah of Garanzi was one of the primary Rishonim from Spain, from Catalonia. And he also, in his Sharei Tshuva, Gates of Repentance, talks about many more commonly violated Isurim, prohibitions. One of them, of course, is Lashon Hara. He has a long treatment of Lashon Hara. Let's start with the Rambam. Start with the Rambam in source number 2. And I want to try to pinpoint how the Rambam defines this Isur and what's really the problem with it. Let's go slowly. Here we go. Source number 2. Amiragel bechavero, person who gossips about his friend. The word miragel is related similar to the word rachil from the Torah. Miragel is somebody who is a peddler of gossip. Peddler of gossip. Somebody who, goes about from one person to another and is constantly saying things about them. So hamiragel bechavero over below taseh. Somebody who collects gossip about a friend violates a negative commandment. Shene'emar lo telech rachil be'amecha, says in Parshat Kedoshim, in Vayikra, you shall not go about as a peddler in your nation. Lo telech rachil. That is the most direct prohibition against Lashon Hara, is phrased in that way. You shall not go about as a peddler of gossip in your nation. Even though we don't get lashes for this matter, it's a great sin. It is a big sin. Vegorein laharog nifashot rabot miYisrael. That's going to be an important thing to keep in mind. It can cause many Jewish people to die. Therefore, juxtaposed with this verse is lo tamor al dam re'echa. Thou shalt not stand idly by the blood of your friend. Lo tamor al dam re'echa means that if your friend is getting attacked, you can't stand idly by and let them get attacked. You have to try to save them. Why is that follow lo telech rachil ba'amecha, the prohibition? Again, gossip, because gossiping can lead to that sort of situation. Gossiping can be damaging. Sharing certain negative information or spreading certain gossip about somebody to the wrong person can have very dangerous consequences. That's what the Rambam says. Say ulamad ma'ira l'doeg ha'adomi. Come and learn from what happened to doeg ha'adomi. Those of you who know a little bit about Tanakh know doeg ha'adomi was someone who lived in the time of David HaMelech and Shaul. David HaMelech was running away from Shaul HaMelech. Shaul was very angry at him. He wanted to kill him. And there was someone named Achimelech. He was a Kohen from the city of Nov. Achimelech helped David out, fed him, housed him. Doeg told that to Shaul. And in retribution for that, Shaul actually said the whole city needs to be killed. He actually commanded his servants to do that. They didn't want to. And Doeg himself went and slaughtered people in the city of Novi Arakonim simply for housing David. So because of this gossip, that, by the way, we'll note, maybe Doeg didn't even know that this was something that was negative. Maybe he didn't know that Shaul was trying to kill David. Nevertheless, this gossip led to people dying. And that's what the Rambam is saying. Just give me one more second, Andrew. Ezu Rachil. So let's go on. Now that's the first part of the Rambam saying Rechilut is bad. Now the Rambam is going to differentiate between a few different forms of this prohibition. Okay, that's the next halacha. Ezehu rachil. What is a gossiper? Is the translation here? I think it's pretty good. Zeh sheto'en divarim v'holech mizeh lazeh v'omer kacham arploni kaf v'kash shamazi aploni afa pishu hames. It's somebody who goes from place to place collecting information about people and says, you know what so-and-so said? Oh, what so-and-so did? Did you hear about so-and-so? You heard what they did? Even if it's true. This destroys the world. That's one. That's rechilut. V'yesh avon gadol mizeh ad me'od. There is an even greater sin. V'hu bechlal lav zeh, which is included in this prohibition. V'hu lashon hara, evil speech. So category 1, rechilut, gossip. Category 2, lashon hara. V'hu, and this is your definition, hamisaper bignut, somebody who denigrates their friend, af al pi she'omer emet, even if they tell the truth. Aval, category 3, ha'omer sheker nikra motzi shem ra al chavera. Someone who speaks not only negatively, but also falsely about their friend. That's another thing. That's motzi shem ra. Motzi shem ra. Someone who bears a false, an evil name. Aval ba'al lashon hara, category 4. Ba'al lashon hara. What's a ba'al lashon hara? Somebody not just who says lashon hara, but is defined by their saying lashon hara. Zeh sheyoshev v'omer. This is somebody who sits there and says, "Kach v'kach hasaploni, v'kach kach hayu avotzav." You know about that guy. This is what he does, and this is what his father used to do, and his mother used to do. V'kach v'kach shemati alav, v'amar dvarim shal genan. And he constantly says things which are negative. Okay. About such a person, it says in Tehillim, may God cut off all guileful lips, the tongues which speak proud things. Okay. So the Rambam has 4 different categories, actually. 4 different ones. Rechilut is one. That's gossip. Then lashon hara, which is true, negative, someone who speaks negatively about davar ganut in a negative way, in a way that denigrates their friends, even if it's true. Somebody who falsely speaks negatively about their friends is a motzi shem ra. And the last is someone who is constantly doing it, who makes it sort of their preoccupation. 4 different categories. Now, before we get to Andrew's point, we might want to separate between these, and I'll just point out what's the main difference between category 1 and 2. So Kesef Mishnah suggests as follows: Rechilut is not even necessarily negative. Not even necessarily negative per se. It's just someone constantly sharing gossip unnecessarily. Sharing gossip. Even if they think maybe it's not negative. That's category 1. Category 2 is negative speech. That's the definition of lashon hara. The only rationale, though, we have for this is in the Rambam, is what? The Rambam does point out a negative impact, and that is the danger, the damage of lashon hara, right? One very basic reason why lashon hara is a problem is because it's just not true that sticks and stones will break your bones or words will hurt you. They very well can hurt you. They can be damaging. Damaging someone's reputation is quite hurtful. You know, I mean, in today's society, it happens so quickly. False or true, negative information gets out about someone. You can lose your job. You can lose your place in the community. It can ruin marriages. It can do all sorts of things. It can cause you to get killed if told to the right person. Someone might attack you. So one basic rationale for lashon hara: what's evil about it? What's evil about it is the damage that it results in. The damage that it results in is evil. That's what makes it evil. So therefore, if that is so, the davar ganut, you would imagine, is something that you would think would be impactful. Impactful negative information. I tell something about Albert to Andrew, it's going to make him think about Albert differently. He won't want to be friends with him anymore. He's not going to want to barbecue with him anymore. He's not going to want to get in business with him anymore. They won't marry their children together, right? That's one emphasis. Okay, Andrew, go for it. Right.
Nothing to do with circumstance things. But what I'm doing is, because out of concern for Albert, I may be sharing information in terms of his interaction with me. Something that's effective.
Right.
That falls into relation.
No. The question is why, and I'm going to get to maybe a good explanation as to why. But assuming that it won't damage him, that would be a good rationale. meaning if the ultimate goal is to help them become better, if you're saying, so Andrew's question is, if you're talking about someone and then it's negative, you're saying, I don't know, you know what, Albert? The way that you spoke to me made me feel horrible about myself. I don't know, whatever it was. It was insensitive, whatever it was. If it's something like that, then you might make him feel bad. It might, but the purpose is constructive, and that's not really damaging. But I'm going to say, even if it is damaging, maybe it's not lashon hara, and that might relate to our second idea. So one focus is, sorry, Amber, I want to say something. Go for it.
So if you know someone wants to be
Good. You know, I want to put a hold on those sorts of questions for now. I want to get to them. Let's focus on the why, the basic definition. What is lashon hara? Why is it so bad? Get the questions in the chat a bit later. Okay, here we go. Let's now move to source number 3. So, actually, before we get to source number 3, I want you to give me another rationale, right? Let me ask you, let me do the following, okay? What do you think about the following case? Let's say, I don't know, Chaim is talking about Kenny, and he talks it, he says, you know what? Kenny is the worst business partner, and he's so dishonest, and he's always cheating his partners, and he's so snobbish, and you don't want to get into business with him. But he says it to me, okay? And I have absolutely no interaction with Kenny. I'm never going to see him. I'm never going to get into business with him. And frankly, I could care less. And Chaim's speech will have absolutely no impact on Kenny whatsoever. Or I don't believe him. I tell you, I don't believe a word you're saying, and okay to be a perfectly reputable individual. And you know that I'm not going to believe you, let's say. You know that I would never believe such a thing about Kenny. Does that make it any less lashon hara? Does it make it okay to say it? You probably think actually no, right? Why? Good. Why is it bad to say something demeaning? So Kenny says, even if it has absolutely no impact on the person whatsoever, because you're saying it to their best friend who thinks the world of them, who doesn't even take anything you say seriously, and it will not impact the relationship whatsoever. Why in that situation is it a problem to say something demeaning about them unnecessarily? Who will it impact? Okay.
And also impact others. I said it.
Good. I want to focus on the second part of that. It will impact the guy who said it. What do you mean by that? In what way will it impact the guy who said it? Meaning, I wasn't going to do business with him anyway, if I'm the one saying it. So in what way will it impact him? And I think you're right, very right. But I want to it makes him a worse person in many ways, which I want to get to. Okay. So the other emphasis of lashon hara is not necessarily the focus on the damage that it causes, but rather on the impact it has on your persona. And that the more you get into the habit of speaking lashon hara, the more damaging it is to your character. That lashon hara, someone who gets into the habit of speaking lashon hara, is somebody who is engaging in an awful character trait, and that itself, beyond any impact, it does nothing. The impact it has on you as a person, that itself, the Torah forbade. In this circumstance, meaning, and I want you to appreciate how bad this is, because let's say anger. I think we can all agree anger is not a positive character trait. It's quite a negative character trait. There is no, at first glance, there is no prohibition in the Torah against getting angry excessively. Most character traits in the Torah are not explicitly prohibited. They're not. Now, we all would agree. You're not supposed to be too arrogant. You're not supposed to be angry. You're not supposed to be too much of a glutton, etc. That's fine. There is no such prohibition. This is a character trait which the Torah specifically prohibited. It's that damaging. Stephen, I'll get your question a little bit later. Let's move a little bit. So this is what you find in source number 3. Look at source number 3. Look at source number 3 is Rabbeinu Yonah, as I mentioned, Shari Tshuva. he points out two separate negative outcomes of Lashon Hara. Two reasons it's a problem. It's not just about the damage. Says Rabbi Yonah, HaMisaper Lashon Hara, Shtayim Heina Kore Otav. There are two different things that someone who speaks about Lashon Hara brings about. One, Hanezek v'aboshen asher yigrom lechavero. One, the damage and humiliation that we know. But two, uvechirato lechayev uleharshia el chaverav v'simchato le'edam. And his own decision to condemn and prosecute his fellows and his joy at their calamity. The very decision to say, I'm going to speak negatively about someone and become excited, rejoice in denigrating them and derive in pleasure from saying negative things about them is per se prohibited. That decision is prohibited even if it has no effect. Based on this, the Chavetz Chaim says in source number 4 the following: V'da, and no, da'afilu imlo ba ayedei lashon hara shum ra'a le'ishahu. Even if your lashon hara causes no harm to the person whatsoever, it was totally ineffective. Kigon shelo kiblu hashom min ha'divarav, such that the listener totally did not accept it. What you're saying is nonsense. Don't talk about that guy like that. I know you're not telling the truth. The kayotzi bazeh. Nevertheless, it's still lashon hara. B'tzara kapara requires atonement. The yoter mizeh, more than this. Da'afilu imhu mishar lechachila shelo yabola nidon shema yibara. Even if you know he's not going to accept what you're saying, you know it won't cause any harm to the person, the subject of your speech. You know it's not going to do anything to him, and you say it anyway. It's still forbidden to share that information. Why? Because of the effect it has on you. And essentially, in source number 5, the Chavetz Chaim, in explaining why this is so, relates back to the few sources and Rabbi Yonah. Okay? So I want to now, because you were all asking me all these questions, go back to our original question. What's so evil about evil speech? There's a few things. In fact, the way that Rabbi Feldman deals with it, you can point 3 things that are really so bad about evil speech. One is the impact, obviously, on the subject of the speech. That's understood. There's also an impact on the speaker and the sort of character trait it encourages and the sort of behavior that it perpetuates. And there's also an impact on the listener. The listener, and he argues society generally. In a society like ours, quite frankly, in which this sort of behavior is pervasive, the impact that it has upon people's ability to take things seriously, to work together, to appropriately analyze information is so horrifically affected by a culture of lashon hara and gossip. So just to go back to the beginning now and to sort of close, we think about all of the things this Gemara says, and I want to try to explain them. The first thing, someone who says lashon hara is kafar be'ikar. Someone who speaks lashon hara as if they deny God's existence. What do you mean? I'm not denying God's existence. I'm just saying something bad about Harry, whoever it is. But it's not about the speech. It's about the character. And the point is making, Rabbi Yonah says this, someone who is in the habit of constantly denigrating others and thinking cynically, what might that obviously lead them to do? Because it starts with a person and it becomes institutions and it becomes Judaism generally, and even God. Once you develop that character trait of cynicism, of negativity, of looking for the negative in people, right? That isn't going to be limited to just people. It will certainly affect your relationship with God too, because it changes who you are. And I wanted to tell, let me just say very briefly, it is Parshat Tazvir Mesorah. This is the parsha about talking about Lashon Hara. So I wanted to share a very brief thought. The Torah tells us there's a certain type of sarat that is in the flesh, and there's a very strange rule about it. The rule is that if your whole body is covered with it, you're pure. You're pure. But if one body part or one part of your body is not covered with it, the minute that happens, you're impure. Which is very strange, right? So if just a little of your body is covered with that type of tzara, you're impure. If your whole body is covered with it, you're pure. And then again, if one part of your body loses the tzara, you're impure. Why is that? So I think I've heard this before, but I think it's a good explanation. And then you can relate to a story of Rav Kook. Rav Mitzvah Cohen Cook was very reluctant to take an interview. He didn't like journalism. He didn't like interacting with journalists and newspapers and things like that. And someone tracked him down. And he asked Rav Mitzvah Cohen Cook, why is it that you don't want to get interviewed? What's wrong? You know, you're such an important person. And so Rav Mitzvah Cohen Cook was in his office, and he went to his blackboard. There's a blackboard in the office. He took some chalk, and he made a dot on the blackboard. He said, what do you see? The guy said, there's a mark on the board. He said, see, that's the problem. I have a perfectly clear blackboard, and all you can think of is the one dot. And that's what you guys do. You can have a person that can have so many positive attributes. What do you focus on? Focus on that one negative thing. Maybe that's what the message of Sarat is also. Because what does someone who tells Lashon Hara and gets Sarat do? They focus on that one thing. So when you get that one spot on your body, you're once again tameh. But that's the sort of negative trait that's going to be pervasive in your activity. So it's kila kafar beikar. Magdil avonot ad l'shamayim. The problem, it grows your sins to heaven. The problem of Lashon Hara is that it's not just one sin, but it grows and grows and grows. And it's one sin that leads to another, leads to another. It can affect your relationships, and all sorts of sins grow from it. So it's not just about that one damaging thing that you share, but it's about the impact that it has generally. And then, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ein ani v'hu yachol l'mador ba'olam. I can't live in the world with this person. Very extreme language. Why is that? Maharal says something that I think is quite profound. He says, Lashon Hara, and relates to what we just said, is evil speech, because you have someone that sins in other areas. Someone that sins in other areas. What incentivizes the sin? Some sort of pleasure, usually. Something they want to eat. So it's not that they want to sin per se, but they like the enjoyment. Most sins are like that. What is the benefit of someone saying Lashon Hara? Often, it's the benefit per se of the fact that they put someone down. The Lashon Hara is, I made somebody else to be worse in another person's eye. The fact that they don't think of that person as well, oh, good, I got them. You're benefiting from the evil itself. You're benefiting from the evil itself. It's one thing to benefit from a good piece of pig. You know, you don't eat pig, but pig tastes good. I get that. But to benefit from the very act of denigrating someone, to get a geschmack out of totally smearing that person in public, that God says, I don't want to live with such a person. And that's what they get benefit from. The world is supposed to be a good place. God is the source of all good. I don't want to live with someone who feeds off of evil. Now, all that said, I want to make one more point, and this will lead to further discussion. Maybe next week we'll talk about situations when you can say Lashon Hara. So, now that we've said this, again, what we've essentially said is Lashon Hara has two different focal points. Point one is the damage, and point two is the character trait, the negative impact it has on your persona, the problem with evil speech per se. Now we can appreciate some of these cases. If the focus of Lashon Hara is the maliciousness of it, the evil of it, what's evil about it is that you're trying to speak evilly. And what if your goal, your intention is for the good? What if you're not trying to do anything evil? Even if objectively the facts might be construed negatively, but that's not your intention. You make it clear. I'm sharing this with you because so-and-so needs help. Or I'm sharing this with you, and I'm only telling it to you because I know that you're considering getting into a relationship with this person, I just want to warn you of this thing. I think it's essential. So that it might be, it's not just that it's okay because it's so important, but it might not be negative speech at all. Because that sort of behavior is the opposite. It's specifically considerate. It's specifically thoughtful. So that discussion and more we'll continue with in the future. Just want to stop here. I thank you all for joining. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But I hope you found this illuminating, and I'm looking forward to learning more with you in future weeks. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.